The morning mist clung to the Montana plains like a shroud, and Samuel Morrison could feel winter approaching in his bones. At 63, he'd spent more years alone on this ranch than he cared to count, the silence broken only by the lowing of cattle and the whisper of wind through the cottonwoods along Bear Creek. Sam guided his horse, Thunder, along the familiar path toward the watering hole. The October air was sharp, carrying the scent of dying grass and the promise of snow. His weathered hands gripped the reins loosely. 30 years of ranching had taught him to read the land like a book, and today something felt different. "Easy, boy," he murmured as Thunder snorted and shied away from the creek bank. The horse's ears were pinned back, nostrils flaring at something Sam couldn't yet see. That's when he spotted the bundle of torn cloth and dark hair near the water's edge. Sam's heart lurched. At first glance, it looked like discarded rags, but the unnatural stillness made his stomach turn. He dismounted slowly, his boots crunching on the frost-covered ground. The boy couldn't have been more than 12, his copper skin pale with cold and loss of blood. His clothes, traditional buckskin leggings and a torn shirt, were soaked through and stained dark red. 3 deep gashes across his back told a story Sam didn't want to imagine. But the child's chest rose and fell in shallow, desperate breaths. "Jesus," Sam whispered, kneeling beside the unconscious boy. He'd seen his share of violence in Vietnam, but finding a child left to die stirred something fierce in his chest. The boy's black hair was matted with blood, and his lips were blue with cold. Sam stripped off his heavy coat and wrapped it around the small frame. The boy was light as a feather, all bones and sinew. As he lifted him, Sam noticed the intricate beadwork on the boy's moccasins. Crow Nation, if his memory served him right. The reservation was 20 miles north, but this child was far from home. "What did they do to you, son?" Sam asked the unconscious boy as he secured him on Thunder's back. The horse seemed to sense the urgency, standing perfectly still as Sam mounted behind the child. The ride back to the ranch house felt endless. Sam held the boy against his chest, feeling the weak heartbeat and shallow breathing. Memories he'd tried to bury surfaced, his own son, Michael, who died in a car accident 15 years ago. The same dark hair, the same small frame at that age. The ranch house came into view, its weathered wood siding and red metal roof a welcome sight. Sam had built it himself in 1985 when he bought the land with his army pension and a dream of starting fresh. Now it felt too big, too empty, filled with the ghosts of the family he'd lost. Inside, Sam laid the boy on his old leather couch, stoking the fire until the room was warm. He cleaned the wounds as best he could. They were deep but not life-threatening, if treated properly. The boy's fever was high, his breathing labored. "Come on, fight," Sam urged, placing a cool cloth on the child's forehead. "Whatever happened, you're safe now." As night fell, Sam sat vigil beside the couch, watching the boy's face in the firelight. The child's features were delicate but strong, with high cheekbones and a straight nose. Even unconscious, there was something dignified about him, something that spoke of inner strength. Sam found himself thinking about the reservation, about the tensions that had existed between the Crow Nation and the local ranchers for decades. Disputes over water rights, grazing land, and old grievances that seemed to multiply rather than heal. He'd always tried to stay neutral, but he knew others weren't so diplomatic. The boy stirred just before dawn, his dark eyes fluttering open. For a moment, they stared at each other, the grizzled white rancher and the injured native child. Fear flickered across the boy's face, and he tried to sit up, wincing at the pain. "Easy there," Sam said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're hurt. You need to rest." The boy's eyes darted around the unfamiliar room, taking in the stone fireplace, the mounted deer head, the photographs on the mantel. His gaze lingered on a picture of Sam in his army uniform, standing next to a young woman holding a small boy. "Water," the child whispered, his voice barely audible. Sam helped him drink, noting how the boy's hands shook. "What's your name, son?" The boy hesitated, then met Sam's eyes directly. "Joseph," he said. "Joseph Crow Feather." "Well, Joseph Crow Feather. I'm Samuel Morrison, but you can call me Sam. Can you tell me what happened to you?" Joseph's face closed off, and he turned away. "I cannot go back," he said simply. "They have decided I am dead to them." Sam felt chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. What do you mean? But Joseph had closed his eyes, exhaustion overtaking him. Sam watched the boy's chest rise and fall, wondering what he'd gotten himself into. He'd found a child left for dead, but he suspected the story was far more complicated than simple abandonment. Outside, the Montana sun was rising over the vast expanse of prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Sam stood at the window, holding a cup of coffee and watching his cattle graze peacefully. His quiet life was about to change in ways he couldn't imagine. 3 weeks had passed since Sam found Joseph by the creek, and the boy was finally strong enough to sit up without wincing. The wounds on his back were healing, but Sam could see deeper scars in the child's eyes, the kind that came from betrayal and abandonment. Joseph barely spoke, answering Sam's questions with nods or single words. He ate the meals Sam prepared, simple, ranch fare of beef stew, cornbread, and coffee, but seemed to expect it to be taken away at any moment. At night, Sam could hear him crying softly, trying to muffle the sound with his pillow. "You don't have to hide it," Sam said one evening, as he sat beside the couch. "I've done my share of crying too." Joseph looked up, surprised. "Cowboys don't cry." "Says who?" Sam asked, settling into his worn recliner. "I cried when my son died. Cried when my wife left me after that. Cried plenty when I came back from the war. Tears don't make you weak, son. They make you human." For the first time, Joseph's guarded expression softened slightly. "Your son, what was his name?" "Michael. He was about your age in that picture." Sam nodded toward the mantel. "Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light." Joseph was quiet for a long moment. "I had a brother," he said finally. "Thomas. He died of sickness last winter. That's when everything changed." Sam waited, sensing there was more. "My father blamed me," Joseph continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Said I should have gotten sick instead. Said Thomas was the strong one, the one who would lead our people. After that, I could do nothing right." The words hung in the air like smoke. Sam felt a familiar anger rising in his chest, not at the boy, but at the adults who had failed him. "That's not how it works, Joseph. Brothers aren't replaceable. You can't trade one life for another. My father said I brought shame to our family, that I was weak because I liked to read the white man's books, because I asked too many questions about the world beyond the reservation." Joseph's hands clenched into fists. "The tribal council said I was becoming too much like the outsiders, that I would poison the other children." Sam felt his heart breaking for this child who'd been rejected for curiosity and intelligence. "So, they cast you out." "My father said if I wanted to be white so badly, I could die like one, alone and forgotten." Joseph's voice cracked. "3 men took me to the border of our land. They said if I ever came back, they would finish what they started." The room fell silent except for the crackling of the fire. Sam struggled to find words that could somehow heal such a deep wound. "I'm sorry, son. No child should have to carry that kind of pain. I dream about Thomas," Joseph said. "He tells me I should have fought harder to save him, that I should have been the one to die." Sam leaned forward. "Can I tell you something? When Michael died, I blamed myself for months. Thought about all the times I was too busy with the ranch, all the conversations we never had. But my wife, Sarah, she told me something before she left. She said guilt is just love with nowhere to go." Joseph looked at him with eyes that seemed far too old for his young face. "Your brother loved you," Sam continued. "That love doesn't disappear because he's gone, and it doesn't make you responsible for his death. Sometimes people die, Joseph. Sometimes it's nobody's fault." Over the following days, Joseph began to open up more. He told Sam about life on the reservation, the poverty, the lack of opportunities, but also the rich traditions and the elders who kept the old stories alive. He spoke of his grandmother, who had taught him to read before she died, and his secret visits to the small library in the nearby town. "I wanted to learn about the world," Joseph explained as they sat on the porch one afternoon, watching the cattle graze. "Grandmother said knowledge was like water. It finds a way to flow, no matter what tries to block it." Sam smiled. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman." She was. "She's the one who taught me English, said I would need it someday." "Father hated that too." "What did you want to learn about?" Joseph's eyes lit up. "Everything. History, science, different cultures. I wanted to understand why there was so much anger between our people and yours. I thought maybe if I understood both sides, you could help bridge the gap, Sam finished. Yes, but Father said I was betraying my heritage, that I was choosing their world over ours. Sam was quiet for a moment, thinking about his own experiences with prejudice and division. You know, son, I don't think you have to choose. The best leaders I've known were the ones who could see from multiple perspectives. You think I could be a leader? Joseph asked, vulnerability creeping into his voice. I think you already are, Sam said. You just need to learn to lead yourself first. That evening, Sam made a decision that would change both their lives. He pulled out a cardboard box from his bedroom closet, Michael's old school books, save for reasons he couldn't explain. He found Joseph sitting by the fire, staring into the flames. I want to show you something, Sam said, setting the box on the coffee table. These were my son's books. I kept them thinking. Well, I'm not sure what I was thinking, but maybe it's time they got used again. Joseph's eyes widened as he saw the collection: math textbooks, history books, novels, and science manuals. You would let me read these? I'd be honored if you would. And if you want, I can teach you ranch work too. Every man should know how to work with his hands. Joseph picked up a book about American history, running his fingers over the cover. Why are you being so kind to me? Sam thought about the question. Because everyone deserves a chance, son. And because, well, this old house has been too quiet for too long. As they sat there together, the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls, Sam realized that finding Joseph hadn't just saved the boy's life. It had given his own life new purpose. For the first time in years, he felt like he was part of something bigger than his daily routine of feeding cattle and mending fences. Outside, the Montana wind whistled through the cottonwoods, carrying the scent of snow and the promise of winter. But inside the ranch house, two unlikely souls were building something neither had expected to find. A family forged not by blood, but by choice and circumstance. The first snow of winter blanketed the ranch in pristine white, and Joseph pressed his face against the kitchen window, watching the flakes dance in the morning light. 6 months had passed since Sam found him by the creek, and the boy had grown both in height and confidence. His black hair now touched his shoulders, and his once hollow cheeks had filled out from Sam's hearty cooking. Storm's coming, Sam said, joining him at the window with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. We'll need to bring the cattle closer to the barn. Joseph had learned to read the sky like Sam taught him, the way the clouds gathered heavy and dark, how the wind shifted direction. Before a big storm, ranch work had strengthened his thin frame, and his hands, once soft from a childhood spent mostly indoors, now bore the calluses of honest labor. I'll saddle Thunder and Scout, Joseph said, already reaching for his coat. The leather jacket was one of Sam's old ones, altered to fit the boy's smaller frame. On the back, barely visible, were the faded scars from that terrible night, reminders of a past that felt increasingly distant. Working together, they guided the cattle toward the shelter of the barn and the windbreak of trees. Joseph had proven to be a natural horseman, and Sam watched with pride as the boy expertly maneuvered his horse to turn a stubborn steer back toward the herd. You're getting good at this, Sam called out, his breath visible in the cold air. Joseph grinned, a sight that still surprised Sam with its rarity and beauty. Grandmother always said I had good hands with animals. She said they could sense a kind heart. As they worked, Sam noticed a truck approaching on the long gravel drive. His stomach tightened when he recognized the sheriff's vehicle. Deputy Martinez stepped out, his expression serious but not unfriendly. Afternoon, Sam, Martinez said, tipping his hat. Joseph. Carlos, Sam replied carefully. What brings you out here? Had some folks from the reservation asking questions about a missing boy. Description matches Joseph here. Martinez looked at the boy, who had gone very still. Now I know. You filed the paperwork to become his guardian, and the state approved it. But there's been some pressure from certain tribal members. Joseph moved closer to Sam, and Sam could feel the boy's tension. What kind of pressure? Nothing official. But Thomas Crowfeather, Joseph's father, he's been talking to some people. Says you stole his son. I saved his son, Sam said firmly, from dying alone in the cold. Martinez nodded. I know that. You know that. But family disputes can get complicated, especially when they cross cultural lines. I'm not here to cause trouble, but I wanted to give you a heads up. There might be some legal challenges coming. After the deputy left, Sam and Joseph finished their work in silence. Inside the warm kitchen, Sam made hot chocolate while Joseph sat at the table, staring at his hands. "You're scared," Sam observed. "Terrified," Joseph admitted. "What if they make me go back? What if the court says I belong with my father?" Sam sat down across from him. "Joseph, look at me. I won't let that happen. You're my son now, in every way that matters." The word son hung between them, the first time Sam had said it out loud. Joseph's eyes filled with tears. "I want to stay," he whispered. "This is my home now. Then we'll fight for it," Sam said simply. Over the next few weeks, Sam consulted with lawyers and gathered documentation. The case was complicated. Joseph's father hadn't legally terminated his parental rights, but he had abandoned the boy in a life-threatening situation. The tribal council was divided, with some members supporting Thomas Crow Feather's claim and others arguing that Joseph was better off with Sam. Meanwhile, Joseph thrived in his studies. Sam had enrolled him in a correspondence program, and the boy devoured knowledge with an hunger that amazed his guardian. He excelled in mathematics and history, but it was his essays about cultural identity and leadership that truly impressed Sam. "Listen to this," Sam said one evening, reading from Joseph's latest assignment. The boy had been asked to write about conflict resolution. True leadership isn't about choosing sides, but about finding the path that honors the truth in both perspectives. A leader must be brave enough to stand in the space between worlds, even when it's lonely. Joseph looked up from his history book, embarrassed. "It's just homework. It's wisdom," Sam corrected. "Wisdom that comes from living through pain and choosing to grow instead of becoming bitter." As spring arrived, melting the snow and turning the prairie green, Joseph began to talk about his future. He wanted to finish high school, maybe go to college. He dreamed of becoming a lawyer or a teacher, someone who could help bridge the gap between native and non-native communities. "I want to go back to the reservation someday," he told Sam as they repaired a fence line. "Not to live, but to help. There are other kids like me, caught between two worlds. Maybe I can show them they don't have to choose." Sam felt a mixture of pride and sadness. "That's a noble goal, son. But are you sure you're ready for that kind of responsibility? I've been thinking about what you said, about leading myself first. I think I'm learning how to do that." The court hearing was scheduled for early summer. Sam hired the best lawyer he could afford, and Joseph spent hours preparing his testimony. The boy had grown taller over the winter, and his voice had begun to change. He carried himself with a quiet dignity that reminded Sam of the great leaders he'd known in the army. "Whatever happens," Sam told him the night before the hearing, "I want you to know that you've made my life better. You've given me a purpose I didn't know I needed." Joseph hugged him, something that had become easier over the months. "You saved my life, Sam. In every way a person can be saved." The next morning, they drove to the courthouse in town. Sam's hands were steady on the wheel, but his heart was racing. Everything they'd built together could be torn apart by a judge's decision. As they walked up the courthouse steps, Sam noticed a group of people gathered near the entrance. Some were from the reservation, including Thomas Crow Feather, an imposing man with graying hair and hard eyes. Others were local ranchers and townspeople who had come to support Sam. But it was the elderly native woman standing slightly apart from the others who caught Joseph's attention. She was small and bent with age, her gray hair braided with colorful beads. When she saw Joseph, her weathered face lit up with joy. "Grandmother," Joseph cried, breaking away from Sam to embrace the old woman. "My boy," she whispered, holding him tight. "My brave, beautiful boy." Sam realized this must be the grandmother who had taught Joseph to read, who had encouraged his curiosity about the world. She looked at Sam over Joseph's shoulder, and he saw approval in her ancient eyes. "You are the one who found him," she said, approaching Sam. "The one who gave him life when his own people would have let him die." "I just did what anyone would do," Sam replied. She shook her head. "Not anyone. You did what a father would do." As they entered the courthouse, Sam felt a flicker of hope. Whatever happened, Joseph had people who loved him on both sides. Maybe that would be enough. The courtroom was packed with an unusual mix of Native Americans from the reservation, local ranchers, and curious townspeople. Judge Patricia Hawkins, a stern woman in her 50s known for her fairness, called the proceedings to order. Thomas Crow Feather sat at the plaintiff's table with his attorney, his face a mask of stoic determination. He wore traditional dress, a beaded shirt, and denims, making a clear statement about his cultural identity. Across the aisle, Sam sat, with his lawyer and Joseph, who had chosen to wear a simple button-down shirt and jeans that somehow managed to honor both his heritage and his current life. "This is a custody matter," Judge Hawkins began, "but it's also about the welfare of a child. I want to hear from all parties involved." Thomas Crow Feather's attorney spoke first, arguing that the boy belonged with his biological father and his tribal community. "Joseph is Crow Nation," he said. "His place is with his people, learning their ways and honoring their traditions. Mr. Morrison, despite his good intentions, cannot provide the cultural connection this child needs." Sam's attorney countered that Joseph had been abandoned and left to die, that Sam had provided not just shelter but love, education, and opportunity. "The biological relationship alone doesn't make someone a parent," she argued. "Mr. Morrison has given this boy a stable home and a chance at a future." Then, it was time for testimony. Thomas Crow Feather took the stand first, his voice steady as he spoke about his son's heritage and his own rights as a father. But when pressed about why he had abandoned Joseph, his answers became evasive. The boy was becoming too influenced by outside culture, he said. I thought some time away might help him appreciate his roots. By leaving him to die?" Sam's attorney asked sharply. "I knew he would find his way back," Thomas replied, but his voice lacked conviction. When Sam took the stand, he spoke simply about finding Joseph and the months that followed. He talked about the boy's intelligence, his curiosity, his desire to bridge cultures rather than choose between them. "I don't want to take him away from his heritage," Sam said. "I want to help him embrace all of who he is." But it was Joseph's testimony that would prove decisive. Now 14 and having grown several inches, he faced the courtroom with a composure that surprised everyone. When asked where he wanted to live, his answer was clear. "I want to stay with Sam," he said. "He's taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about choice and commitment and love." Thomas Crow Feather's face tightened. "You would choose the white man's world over your own people." Joseph turned to face his biological father directly. "I'm not choosing between worlds, Father. I'm choosing to live in both. Sam has taught me about hard work and responsibility, but he's also encouraged me to learn about our traditions. I've been reading about Crow history, about our great leaders like Chief Plentycoos. I want to honor that legacy." "By abandoning your people?" Thomas demanded. "By becoming someone who can help them," Joseph replied. "There are kids on the reservation who are struggling, who feel caught between two worlds like I did. Maybe I can help them find their way." The courtroom fell silent. Judge Hawkins called for a recess, and during the break, something unexpected happened. Joseph's grandmother, who had been silent throughout the proceedings, approached Thomas Crow Feather. "My son," she said softly, "your pride has blinded you to what this boy could become." "He's forgotten who he is, Mother," Thomas replied. "Has he? Or has he learned to be more than we ever imagined?" She gestured toward Joseph, who was talking quietly with Sam. "Look at him. Really look. He carries himself like a leader. He speaks with wisdom beyond his years. Is this not what we want for our children?" Thomas watched his son, and for the first time, Sam saw uncertainty in the man's eyes. When court resumed, Judge Hawkins had made her decision. "This case has forced me to consider what's truly in the best interest of this child. While I respect the importance of cultural heritage, I cannot ignore the fact that Joseph was abandoned in a life-threatening situation. More importantly, I've heard testimony from a young man who has clearly thrived in Mr. Morrison's care." She looked directly at Joseph. "However, I don't want to sever your connection to your biological family and culture. Therefore, I'm awarding permanent custody to Samuel Morrison, but with the provision that Joseph will spend summers on the reservation with his grandmother, learning about his heritage." Joseph's grandmother smiled through her tears. Even Thomas Crow Feather looked relieved. Though he tried to hide it, 5 years later, Joseph graduated as valedictorian of his high school class. Sam sat in the front row, bursting with pride as his son, for that's what Joseph had become, delivered a speech about leadership and community service. "Education isn't just about personal advancement," Joseph told his classmates. "It's about developing the skills to serve others, to bridge divides, and to solve problems that affect entire communities." After graduation, Joseph was accepted to the University of Montana on a full scholarship. He planned to study law and political science, with the goal of eventually working in tribal law and community development. The night before he left for college, Sam and Joseph sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. The ranch had prospered over the years, and Joseph had been an integral part of that success. "I'm proud of you, son," Sam said, "but I'm going to miss having you around." "I'll be back," Joseph promised. "This will always be home, but I've got work to do. The reservation kids, them and others. There are a lot of people caught between worlds, Sam. Native kids who feel displaced from their culture, immigrant families struggling to fit in, rural communities that feel forgotten. I want to help them find their voices." Sam smiled. "Your grandmother was right. You were born to be a leader. I was born to be abandoned," Joseph corrected gently. "But I was chosen to be loved. That's what made the difference." 10 years after that, Joseph Crow Feather Morrison, he had legally added Sam's name to his own, was elected to the Montana State Legislature as the youngest representative in the state's history. His campaign had focused on rural development, education reform, and bridging cultural divides. Sam, now in his 70s but still spry, watched the inauguration ceremony with tears in his eyes. Joseph's speech that day would be remembered as one of the most inspiring in Montana political history. "I stand before you today as living proof that America's strength lies not in the purity of our bloodlines, but in our capacity to choose family, to choose community, to choose love over fear," Joseph said. "I was raised by a white rancher and a Crow grandmother, by Shakespeare and traditional stories, by the values of both the reservation and the ranch. I am not torn between worlds. I am strengthened by them." In the audience, Thomas Crow Feather sat beside his mother and Sam Morrison, 3 generations united by their shared love for the young man on the stage. The relationship between Joseph and his biological father had healed over the years, built on mutual respect rather than obligation. "Every child deserves what I was given," Joseph continued. "Not just shelter and food, but the chance to discover who they're meant to become. That's the America I believe in. One where a boy left for dead can grow up to serve all people, where our diversity is our strength, and where love is always stronger than fear." As the crowd erupted in applause, Sam thought about that cold morning when he'd found a broken boy by the creek. He'd thought he was saving Joseph's life, but the truth was more complex. They had saved each other, the lonely rancher and the abandoned child, and in doing so, they had helped heal a small piece of the world. The story of Samuel Morrison and Joseph Crow Feather became legendary in Montana, told and retold as an example of what's possible when people choose compassion over judgment, when they see potential instead of problems. It was a story about the American dream, not the one built on individual success, but the deeper dream of becoming a nation where everyone belongs, where love can triumph over hate, and where the abandoned can become the leaders who show us. All the way home, years later, on a cold but brilliant January morning, the sky above Helena stretched clear and endless, a canvas of winter blue as if painted in honor of the day. Crowds filled the Capitol lawn, wrapped in coats and blankets, braving the chill not just for the history being made, but for the hope it represented. Tribal leaders stood alongside ranchers, teachers stood beside veterans, and schoolchildren held handmade signs bearing Joseph's name. A drum circle played softly in the distance, its rhythm steady like a heartbeat, ancestral and proud. Snow clung gently to the steps of the Capitol building where, for the first time in the state's history, a Native American man prepared to take the oath of office as governor of Montana. Joseph stood tall, dressed not only in a suit but in the weight of history, centuries of broken treaties, silenced voices, and stolen futures now converging into this single, powerful moment. His mother's beaded sash, draped discreetly beneath his coat, was his quiet tribute to the lineage he carried. As the Chief Justice finished the oath, the applause erupted like a wave, crashing and rising with a force that felt both joyful and cleansing. He stepped up to the podium. The microphones crackled slightly as the wind picked up, carrying his voice across the lawn and into every waiting ear. "This office belongs not to me," he began, his voice resonant and firm, "but to every person who has ever felt displaced, forgotten, or left behind. To the children who grew up in trailers on the reservation, wondering if anyone outside their world even knew they existed. To the ranch hands and gas station clerks and janitors who were told they'd never matter. To the elders who carried wisdom through silence because no one asked them to speak. This victory is not mine. It's ours. He paused. A hush fell over the crowd. Then he continued, his tone softening. We are all worthy of love, all capable of greatness. Not because of our wealth or our pedigree, but because we endure. We rise. And when we are given even the smallest chance, we give back with everything we've got. We deserve that chance. Every single one of us deserves to serve something greater than ourselves. He stepped back from the podium to thunderous applause. Some wept openly. Others simply stood still, stunned by the sheer weight of what had just happened. In that moment, Montana was not just a place. It was a promise, finally kept, and far from the capital, hundreds of miles away, in a small, weathered ranch house surrounded by golden fields and the whisper of pine trees. An old man named Sam Morrison sat alone in his living room. The television flickered softly in the corner, showing the ceremony in real time. His boots rested on a worn ottoman, and beside him on the table sat an old photograph. Two figures smiling in front of a beat-up truck, one young and full of fire, the other older, steady, proud. Sam leaned forward slightly, his hands folded, his back aching with age but his heart light as air. He watched Joseph's face on the screen, saw the determination in his eyes, the strength in his stance, the kindness in his words, and then, with no one else around to hear, he smiled a slow, quiet smile, the kind that comes from knowing you made just one right choice that changed everything. His voice, barely louder than a breath, filled the room with a reverent warmth. That's my boy, he whispered. Outside, the wind swept gently across the snow-dusted fields. A hawk soared overhead, and somewhere in the stillness of that big Montana sky, the past and future met, not as strangers, but as kin.